was a bit concerned when I read this story about Amazon taking creative control of James Bond, but let me just preface that by saying that, you know, this could potentially go one of two ways. I'm seeing, you know, like the potential for, you know, TV shows and content being produced now, not just the movies. On the flip side of, you know, if you're looking at it from a positive perspective, Amazon Studios actually has created some quality TV. But I'm thinking of shows like Reacher, Fallout, there was another one that was off the top of my head. The Boys, I think, was the other one that comes to mind. So it's not as if it's impossible for them to say if they wanted to create a James Bond show, there's a chance they might do a good job with it. The Rings of Power show is probably an outlier in that because that didn't turn out terribly well. But the flip side of this is that I'm just thinking of Star Wars, Star Trek, and a whole bunch of other franchises where they got sold off from, you know, either from the original creator or the controlling interest or anyone that was at least maintaining the legacy. So in the case of Star Wars, it was like severing the connection with George Lucas. With Star Trek, yeah, Gene Roddenberry left, you know, I think he died in 91, but he had a successor that carried on his legacy for at least throughout the rest of that decade. So that whole wave during the 90s still maintained his vision, but by the time you get to, you know, the mid 2010s, it all just went out the window. And I'm just concerned that this is where James Bond's going to go, because the James Bond franchise historically has been the big cinematic event every couple of years. The family has had, you know, the Broccoli family have had a very tight control of, you know, it must have X, Y, and Z and must be executed in a certain way. And there's just the potential that the corporation coming in and just going, hey, yeah, let's make T-shirts, let's make, you know, 3 different TV shows, a bit, you know, using a peripheral character as the star character, and you know, all that sort of stuff. It's not to say that maybe they could create good stuff out of that. It's not impossible, but I have concerns.
Ben, if the next James Bond starts with the last one having been all a dream, then maybe I can see a future for James Bond.
I was about to say it's prophetic that he died at the end of the last movie then.
I personally thought that was a statement that this was the future for James Bond and that there would be a whole new James Bond thing, but you've already pretty much said it. And I think probably the example that comes to mind that's probably closest for me, and if anyone else is a Doctor Who fan, they would understand. So there's classic Doctor Who, and there's obviously the current Doctor Who series. I actually think that they've done the current series really, really well in terms of being true to Doctor Who, the classic Doctor Who. But it ain't classic Doctor Who. And it doesn't matter how you dress this up. As you said, James Bond was a big cinematic event, and James Bond acted in a certain way, and certain villains acted in a certain way, and certain things happened in a James Bond film, and we loved it. I just think James Bond actually died at the end of the last James Bond, and that's it. So whatever they do now will look like James Bond. It'll be called James Bond, but it ain't going to be James Bond. It's going to be people doing James Bond kind of things, and that's the best outcome we could possibly hope for if the content's good.
And that's the thing that concerns me. And you can see it applied to so many franchises now. Like Doctor Who was another one I was going to mention, actually, because that's been in the news recently for being cancelled, actually, in its current form. But what was kind of it's like, why go on with the name other than you know that the name has name recognition and you can easily sell it if the actual execution of it doesn't have anything to do with what it actually was about it to begin with. That to me is the problem with current pop culture entertainment.
Yeah.
In the past, it's like create a new franchise and sell it and make it modern for, you know, the current culture, and it'll probably be successful, but there doesn't seem to be any guts to do that.
Look, you can make Back to the Future 4 tomorrow. You could get Lucas back to make some new Star Wars, but even with Lucas there, it ain't going to be Star Wars anymore. It's just going to be more films called Star Wars. You know, it's not to diminish anyone's enjoyment. If it's a good film, you'll still go and see it and enjoy it. But I just wish they would let some things run their course.
Absolutely.
You can't have 20 feature films under a franchise and think there's anything special about them.
What else is there to mine?
Except for James Bond. And it's been done.